So I wrote this one with Maggie Miles and Kenny Fleetwood, who also co-produced this song with me. Kenny started building out a beat and I started playing this weird, funky bass riff. So I started playing this. And that, for whatever reason, like as soon as we heard that, we're like, okay, let's chase this thing. So Kenny ended up building this super dope beat around it. We ended up writing most of the verse and chorus completely to that. Everything kind of falls around that bass groove. As we started to build it out, we threw another bass line down with that riff popping in and out in certain places, so it sounds like this. Pitched it up with Little Altar Boy. Full octave, only at like 11 o'clock, and then added a little drive, which makes it sound like this. Right, added Bit Crusher, give it a little bit more of that vintage feel. And then I ended up rolling off all of the low end and the top, so it's just kind of sitting in the middle to get it out of the way of the actual bass line. Compressed it with an optical compressor from Acme Audio, and then just shaped the transient a little bit to get a little more attack out of it. This is the Kilohertz transient shaper, by the way. And then just put a limiter on it to get it to sit in the mix. So finally, that bass riff by the end of production sounded like this. Right, and then you add the real bass in. And they kind of separate and they play their own part in the song. Ended up writing the melodies around it. And then we knew ultimately with this tight feel, we wanted to add some real instrumentation, and we knew a big part of the song was going to be drums, real drums. So Maggie actually had a drummer that she wanted to use in Berlin, Germany, named Ollie Friedrich. And Ollie and I connected over email, kind of told him what Kenny and I were looking for from a production standpoint, and send him the track at where it was. And what's cool about these drums is we were able to be a little more playful with them. They didn't have to be so locked into the grid. And I told him that. I told him ultimately I wanted to use a lot of his room sound to make it feel a little wider. And I wanted the programming to act as the glue because it was already feeling so tight and I didn't want to lose that. So I told him to just kind of be loose about the way he played. Here's that programming in the bass line, which is really all that's happening there other than Maggie's vocals. And this is the programming. And then you add the drum kit in and you get this. Just kind of widens it. I'm affecting his drums as well. I'm sending him to a bus and just kind of adding a bit of a CLA effects, gritty distortion vibe to it. But to me, that was the key to getting the fatness and like swag out of these verses. And then you add Maggie's vocal in there and it's just gold. So when we got to the chorus, I remember we got somewhat close to the finish line on production and we hopped on FaceTime with Kenny. So we ended up deciding to add a little bit of keys on the back half just to help it feel like it lifts from chorus A to chorus B. And Kenny ended up throwing us over this clavinet part. Because we were missing a little bit of movement. Everything has such a tight pocket in the song. We wanted something that was kind of fun and moving. So he sent me that, and this I affected pretty heavily before we went to mix. So I first used Nicky Romero's Kickstart, which is just a great sidechain plugin, helps it do this. Gets it out of the way of the kick. Added a little of like spatial effects from Valhalla, CLA effects, give it a little bit of slap reverb. Compressed it, and then I'm using RC20, which I'm sure a lot of you are using now. It's an incredible plugin to help give you that vintage retro kind of thing. So that's giving it a bit of distortion, a little bit of the wobble effect as well. EQ'd a little bit in Pro Q to make it a little wider, and then rolled off all of the low end to get some of that out of the way. So ultimately you get this. And then the reason I really loved working with Maggie is she's all for chasing the weird stuff. Things that just make the song a little more unique. So there's actually a lot of different moments throughout the song where there's just noise, from plugging a guitar in, which we did here, right? And that happens right here in verse 2. Just unique stuff like that I think makes this song really stand out. But in between verse 2 and chorus 2, we were trying, there's this moment of silence where we kind of suck the track out before that chorus hits to help that chorus hit harder. And we were trying to figure out what to fill that space with, because Maggie didn't want silence. And we went back to her voice memo, which we used at the beginning of the song as well. And the voice memo was from the day we wrote the song in the studio. Just kind of us talking, coming up with lyrics. And we ended up putting this in, which is Kenny saying "Not my vibe," and then Maggie. And it fills this space so perfectly. It just happened. We just kind of happened to drop it in and it worked. And getting to that chorus, that chorus just hits so hard. It feels so good. The last piece of the puzzle on this song that we didn't lock in until the very, very ending process of production, like literally days before we went to mix on this, was the outro. Because from day one, I think we had all agreed that ultimately we wanted the old 80s, 90s fade out vibe on this song. That being said, we wanted to make sure the track didn't just feel like it was on a loop. So the last day that I had Maggie here, she went over and just kind of sat at the synths and started laying these down over the track at the very end. Just kind of jamming along with the track, and it filled a bunch of space really well. And what I love about this ending is there's just a lot happening. There's a crap ton of stuff happening here. And I love it because it all somehow finds its place in the track. When we track guitars, which was done by, he goes by Sly Boy, we had him rip a guitar solo at the end. Maggie was like, just play as many notes as you can. No structure whatsoever, just play. And this is what we ended up tracking. And I wanted to make that even more chaotic, so we actually tracked like the noise floor, which is just this, of the amp, through the phasing. And then with Maggie's synths, add the bass guitar in, you get this. By the way, this bass line, and it just kind of makes the fade out concept a little more interesting. And that's how we ended up deciding to finish the song off.
That's a look into the track Costume Party by Maggie Miles. Be sure to go follow her on socials @_Maggie Miles, and go follow Kenny as well @Kenny Fleet. Lastly, be sure to go check out the whole song anywhere you stream music.